Welcome. This is the next presentation on the Greek, on the Roman religions of the Imperial Rome time period. That is the time between 50 and 100 CE, Christian era, when the early New Testament letters were written. Now, the Roman religions had several focuses. We covered in the first series the way that Roman citizens looked at gods and manipulated them. The second one, we looked at how Romans experienced religion at home, because religion was part of every moment of their life. And in this third part, we look at the gods of Rome and Roman country estates, how the city people and how the country people looked at the Roman gods. Again, you have the Romans who have family and honor and patronage as the key parts to their system. Around it is the concepts of purity and pollution as far as religion, and you look at country versus city. And someplace in all of this, they need to manipulate the gods to make sure they're safe. Well, the gods of early Roman kingdom were first set up, it tells us in history by Livy, by Numa Pompilius. He was the second king of Rome, and he set up the temple of Janus, which was essentially the god of war with precise rituals. And Rome, as Livy describes it in the early time, was one of conquest. It gathered people from cities and formed a new city where there was an open population. So Numa was setting up for the rest of the Roman times specific habits. And the Romans saw this as a very successful habit because the Roman city grew from a small, very inconsequential city to a city that ruled the rest of the world. Now, Janus was the god of the door, and the temple was closed if it was at peace and open at war. It said that it was only closed very few times, very few years throughout all of Romans' history. It was constantly at war, constantly at conquest. Now, the other part of the early Roman gods were the same gods that you find in the family life. Janus for the lifeblood of the family, Penis for the storehouse, Vista for the hearth, and Lar for the family luck. And you see here the Temple of Vesta, the ruins in Rome that still look circular to mirror the hearth. Okay, so what about the priesthood of Rome in the imperial times? There was a rex sectorum, a king of sacrifices. This is one of the patricians, one of the people at the highest level, who married in a comfortito and was a son of a comfortiti, which means he was in a special class of priests. And his wife also served as the queen of sacrifices, and they had real moral restrictions and behavioral restrictions. So very few people really qualified, but it was a position of high honor. Now, there were something called major flemens, which were priests for the Jupiter, Mars, and Quirinus temples, and they could only be held by patricians. Now notice these patricians had both family business and priests. There was no church and state split. Everything was combined because the patricians had to have a certain wealth, had to have a certain business and patronage. Now the minor flemens, 12 minor gulls, Vulcan, Virginus, Flora, Carmenta, which is a prophetess, Plutia, which is the goddess of the Palatine. You remember the Palatine Hill where a great deal of the Roman structures were. Fertina, the goddess of the sacred roof on the Genitum, another hill, Portunus, Spatira, and Pono, all things we maybe not have heard except maybe Vulcan, but plebeians could be priests. And so there was a place for everyone in the priesthood. Now Rome gladly adopted Greek gods because they became very entwined and gave them new names. So Juniper was really comes from the Greek god Zeus, and he was the sky god. Juno was the Roman name for the Greek god Hera, and her focus was women. Minerva was the Roman name for the Greek goddess Athena, and she looked at crafts and war. Apollo had the same name, and he had youth and music and prophecy. Aristotles was the same as the Greek Apistos, and he was healing. Mars was the name for the Greek god Ares of war. Vesta was the same god as Hesta. Mercury is Hermes, and then we notice that Mercury is the god there of shopkeepers, thieves, and eloquence. Certes was the Roman name for the Greek god Demeter and focused on fertility and grain. Vulcan, which we noted as a minor god, is the same as Hephaestus, which is the fire and smith. Diana and Artemis were the gods of the Roman woods, the moon, the women, the slaves, and Fortuna was of farming and luck. Bacchus was the god of wine and debauchery. Venus was the god of love, and Castor and Pollux were for the sailors, and Neptune for the seas. You notice there is the same thing borrowed from the Greek. There was a lot of intertwining in those early days. Now there were also cults of the land. Again, the Lars, the luck of the familias, the god of luck of the family, was always key to every farmland or every piece. There was also the luck of the crossroad that watched over travelers, or Terminus that watched over the boundaries, or Certes again, who was very special to the land because it was the goddess of spring and growth. Rustina was the god of plain. Jacanus, which you may have heard before, in the family as the beginning of the man and woman union, was also over hilly cliffs. Colina was over hills going into valleys, and the harvest was always cared for by the major gods, Juniper, Junus, and Janus. Now, these type of things really set how the Roman citizens looked at their life and the Roman country estates that many of the patricians had. However, these were not necessarily the origins of the empire. They went far beyond that. And in the next presentation, I'll cover the religions of the Roman Empire. Thank you for listening, and I hope this has been interesting for you.